What's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. We'll bring Phil Perry in just a second. First, I want you to listen to this. This is Damar Hamlin.
Something that I'm passionate about.
Something that you want people to know about you.
I mean, honestly, outside of the ball right now, outside of football, chasing M's. I mean, the only thing I could think of saying right now is I'm big on family. Like, I'm big on my family unit. Like, my mom, my dad, my little brother, like, that's pretty much my whole world. Outside of any other thing going on, my life revolves around them. Like, I don't really do too much without my mom and dad's opinion. Whether I take it or whether I don't, you know, but sometimes I just want to hear it, you know. That's just how I was raised, and that's just something I'm big on, so that's I would say family.
Nobody is going to soon forget Monday night's feeling of helplessness, understanding that we were watching a 24-year-old quite literally fighting for his life on the field and watching his teammates react in real time to the heroic work being done by trainers and medical staff. And unlike the dozens of other times we've seen players prone on the field, this was different in that you could tell that there was not going to be a thumbs up or a notion that somebody had sat up or that there was movement in their extremities. And as a result, the very true life and death nature of professional football and football in general and contact sports was brought home. Everyone was terrified of the worst possible scenario. And understanding that, what now or what next were not even broached and shouldn't have been. But this is an industry that generates $17 billion in revenue. And while it has ground to a halt in providing its entertainment product, and while we saw the toll that actually so often can play out for men my age and younger, and Phil's age, in darkened rooms with minds that are addled or broken bodies that just don't work anymore, we saw the toll last night. There's no real moral to this story. The risks inherent in a contact sport and in football in general, not just professional football, where the wrong hit at the wrong time in the wrong spot can have catastrophic consequences. It's always there. So I guess today is this Tuesday, not to reflect on necessarily what happens next with that game and its result and how it impacts the New England Patriots playoff chances, but more to reflect on, you know, what these guys who we have developed professional relationships with and friendships in some cases, the guys who've been around longer, you know, what they have to stare at when they go on the field and block out and put in a little tiny compartment in their mind and up on a shelf when they go and play, and how they may try and deal with what is obviously a trauma that was experienced Monday night, not just by the people immediately there and his teammates in the Cincinnati Bengals, but people all over in the NFL who are in that line of work and the people who consume it and have jobs in it. Come on in here, Phil. So, Phil, it's right now Tuesday, just before noontime, and we don't have, as we do this podcast, a massive amount of information. And I think that the NFL is smart to make sure that they are judicious in the way they move forward with future plans, right?
Yeah, Tom, they're going to have to be incredibly judicious. There's so much going on here. There are so many things to consider. Primarily, though, the consideration has to be about the players. And I thought you put it well just in terms of the compartmentalizing that these players do when they take the field and they understand that they're putting their bodies at risk. I just think last night was different, though, right? You know, that little shelf that you talk about where you put those thoughts up there before kickoff every week, you know, that wasn't a dime-sized thought last night. That's a boulder. That's a bowling ball that you're putting on that shelf, because no one is accustomed to seeing that. This kind of thing has happened maybe a couple times before in the NFL, and you know, there are a couple of other incidents in other sports where something like this has happened, But even if you know your body's on the line, you're not anticipating something like that. And so I think even for these players who understand the risks, I think last night changed some things for them. I don't know that for a fact, but I think it had to have, because this is unprecedented.
It is, in the NFL and in prime time, and the awareness that we have now. And there's a situation that keeps rolling through my head, and it's also involves Buffalo, the Buffalo Sabres in 1989, in March of 89. Their goaltender, Clint Malarchuk, in one of the most disturbing and troubling videos you could ever find, had his carotid artery cut by a skate, and he was bleeding out on the ice. Fortunately, he survived, but the entire crease was filled with blood. They finished that game. That happened 9 minutes in. I looked at the box score. He was injured 9 minutes in. That wouldn't happen today in any sport at any time. What happened last night was the right thing to have happen. And I know that there's a lot of conversation about the reported 5 minutes to warm up. I think the NFL was in uncharted territory there. I think we want to look at the NFL as a soulless industry filled with ghouls. I just don't think they knew exactly what to do, and that was the easy bookmark. We're going to try and do something. We'll see what goes on. Because we have all seen these occasions in which an individual has to be carted off the field, sadly, and then the game does resume under muted and somber terms, but it resumes. So until you understand that this is an outlier, you just, I guess, would project that we're going to do what we normally do until we hear otherwise. And they did the right thing. But I don't know if castigating the NFL for what they're denying even happened, which Joe Buck said they're going to take 5 minutes to warm up. I mean, was that even said as fact? Or maybe they'll take 5 minutes to warm up, or usually they'll take 5 minutes to warm up, or they're thinking about taking 5 minutes to warm up. There was no edict. So I guess what I'm saying, Phil, in a long roundabout way and sidetracking, is that I think the league is going to do the right thing. And I think that they will be more sensitive to the mental health of everybody involved, because hell, if you and I are feeling it the next day, and the first thing I thought of when I woke up was Damar Hamlin, imagine what the players who witnessed within 20 feet of themselves life-saving measures having to be taken are feeling today.
Of course. And I think, the opinions on the league and its handling of it will vary. I just think, number one, the league hasn't over time done a whole lot for people to give them the benefit of the doubt when they hear something like that in real time. And Joe Buck did say it on multiple occasions during the brief portions of the broadcast that we got as they were coming in and out of breaks.
4 times he said it.
It was so while this is going on, he's hearing from somebody. He said the sideline at one point. He said the league at one point. So, and again, maybe that's protocol. And maybe that's somebody who's a league official who's at the stadium for a primetime game saying, well, this is generally speaking what happens. And it looks like that got communicated to the players on the field, because you saw Joe Burrow warming up and you saw Stephon Diggs. Man, I don't know, just maybe it does just speak to the ability to compartmentalize, but Stephon Diggs talking to a group of Bills players on the sidelines, looking like he's rallying them to go get ready to play a football game after we saw it on TV. We saw tears streaming down his face minutes earlier. It was incredible. The problem that I do have a little bit with the NFL today is the handling of it late last night, and Troy Vincent saying, well, that never crossed our minds. I talked to Roger, that never crossed my mind, never crossed his mind. And even if that's true, can't you go about it a little bit differently and say something along the lines of, I know what was reported on the television broadcast, and protocol is protocol, but obviously nobody's ever been in a situation like that before. And very quickly, we all found out just how serious and grave the situation was. It became very clear very quickly what the right thing to do was. Don't completely dismiss it and act like, the broadcast partner that, is paying a lot of money and has some really excellent people on staff, is, whatever they're telling the nation watching this thing, that's completely made up and fabricated. I think there was a different way to go about it.
Yeah, your point's well taken too. It's not as if the NFL has, over the years, whether it been through absurd scandals like Deflategate or Spygate, or more sinister actions like the CTE and brain study cover-ups that they engaged in that have resulted in billions of dollars in payouts to the players. Yeah, they have sacrificed a lot of the benefit of the doubt. So maybe I'm off. I just sometimes feel as if we need a villain in these instances, and the NFL as a soulless entity becomes the easy receptacle for everyone's angst and that 5 minutes.
And they did do the right thing, right? I mean, they got to it. They got to the right thing, but it did look like, again, we're being told a story as it's playing out, and we're all sitting there watching, and it's a hard thing to watch, but we're also watching because we want information. We want an update. We want to hear that he's doing well. But you could see, I think it was even after the first time Buck mentioned, it looks like they're going to have about 5 minutes here to warm up and try to get ready to play, that Zach Taylor went back across the field to talk to Sean McDermott again. And I don't know what that conversation was, but you could see McDermott eventually sort of nod his head and say, okay, turn to his players and say, locker room. So it just looked like that was their call. And, again, kudos to the league and I don't know what else they could have done. So I don't know how much, congratulations they should get, but they did eventually get to the right thing here. And I wonder what the right thing will be moving forward.
Well, here I am in the position of defending the league. And I don't want to spend too long on this in terms of whether they
because it's not the focus.
Or it's not the focus. Exactly. It's not the focus. And the focus now is, as the day goes along and we find out more information as to the situation with Damar Hamlin, was this an event that occurred that was beyond anyone's control? We understand all the league does to minimize head and neck collisions and targeting of players and prone players, while understanding that it cannot eliminate the amount of collisions and contact that the game is based on. It's a brutal game. No matter how palatable and digestible it's been made for advertisers and sponsors and the general public, it's a brutal friggin' game. And you played it better than I did, and you probably had to put yourself in a bad place before you played the game to inflict some pain. It's a pain-based game, Phil.
It is, and I wonder, is it avoidable? Would it have been avoidable? Would it not? What the response has been to head injuries has been, fixing the technology or trying to improve the hardware and the equipment that these guys are using. And so I wonder if this one incident, and of course it would be worth it, but if an incident like this changes the way players dress before every game, because there's not a whole lot there. It's, that chest plate on your shoulder pads. I don't think it covers very much for some of these guys, and it doesn't feel like a whole lot of padding. So maybe even if it's something like that, anything, Tom, to avoid what happened last night, obviously should be considered here.
Yeah, and I think people in Massachusetts are maybe aware of the notion that there can be sudden impact to a chest area, and that's because it's a condition called commotio cordis, and we don't know that Damar Hamlin suffered that decisively. There's no reports, but if he went into cardiac arrest, the reason I mentioned Massachusetts is maybe a decade or two ago, there was a young boy playing Little League baseball who was struck in the chest with I believe it was a pitch just under the rib cage. And it hits at that microsecond of an uptick when your heart is in an upbeat. And because you don't have, as a youngster, usually the padding from bone and muscle around your heart, it makes a greater impact, and it can knock your heart into arrest. So we don't know that that's the case with him. Many different folks in the medical field have speculated that that was possibly what happened. But I'm explaining that as a way of mentioning that Phil's point about extra protection in that chest area or on the rib cages might become something that has to be scrutinized, at least as a possibility. So advance the product, advance the protections for these players if necessary, based upon what you learn as things go along, because this is that phenomenon of commotio cordis is not unknown, Phil.
Right. And again, we don't know if that's what happened.
I know. Was that bad by me? See, this is a minefield out here.
No.
I don't want to walk into performing as an English major, some kind of friggin' diagnosis from my living room in Freetown, Mass.
I think it's all fair. To discuss. These are the kinds of things that people are thinking about right now. I think people are wondering too, Tom, especially locally, our listeners, how do you, if you're the league, how do you try to figure out what's next in terms of
the game
season and the game? Do you play it? I just was reading our friend Kevin Clark on The Ringer. He says, hey, maybe just declare the thing a tie and move forward, trying to play it on a Wednesday and then having games on Sunday after that. I mean, you're assuming these guys are going to be ready to play by Wednesday. The Bills, meanwhile, have reportedly flown back to Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
So we're recording this on Tuesday, be asking them to fly back to Cincinnati and put all of those emotions that are still so raw aside to get that game played on the spot where you just saw your friend, revived. And so I don't know. I don't know what the right thing is to do, what the realistic thing is to do. But I'm sure that's where conversations have headed today for the league and for these teams.
I mean, the league does have a week built in between the conference championships and the Super Bowl. And we saw that used in 2001 when the league canceled a week or pushed them back for a week and consumed that. So that could be something that they would consider, perhaps play this week's game, Patriots and Bills, and then put the conclusion of Cincinnati in the middle of next week, and then call it's just the logistics of it are so confounding, and the need to be sensitive as a public relations measure as well for the league, who usually takes it right in the face, they step on a rake anytime they can. And they don't want to step on a rake here. So if they can convince these teams to take a tie, now what will the other see? That what you don't see behind the scenes is the owners in a $17 billion a year revenue sport where the teams are worth $6 billion a year, and the people next to the owners in their ears who then start saying, you know what this means, though? You're going to get X, Y, and Z because of that. There are 30 fiefdoms who need to be heard from and want to be heard from. So I would imagine that you have to lean on your ownership right now, too, and a guy like Robert Kraft in an instance like this, right, Phil?
Yeah, because, obviously these are in some way, shape, or form business decisions, but even if you're able to zoom out, whatever you may miss out on because of a wonky schedule at the end of the year, I think sometimes the ability and the expression of some sympathy and the ability to show that you're thinking about the humanity of the people involved here, that can be a good decision business wise too. So like to your point earlier, I think people who will be involved here are smart enough to know that to be those, ghoulish billionaires that people like to think of them as, is not going to be the way to go about this. So I don't know. Again, we're in an unprecedented situation. We haven't been in a situation where a game has been stopped like this before. Tom, we are just coming off of COVID season where they were playing games at all times of day and all times of the week. And so maybe that has given people, the powers that be, some perspective that, hey, if we really want to be flexible, we can be flexible here. It's how badly do we want to make this work? And how badly do the teams involved want to play this game? I think all of those things will factor in, and hopefully they'll come to a decision that makes sense. I think what you'd hate to see, and hate is a strong word, obviously everybody is only caring about the health and well-being of Damar Hamlin, but I think it would be difficult for the Bills to have to play a game on, say, a Wednesday, and then turn around and play on a Sunday and have somebody tell them, well, hey, this is what happens on Thursday Night Football every week. Shrug of the shoulders. Sorry. And they lose to the Bengals and they lose to the Patriots somehow because it's a short week. And now you're talking about a team that looked like it was going to be the 1 seed is all of a sudden a 3 seed. And again, hopefully as all this is happening, Damar Hamlin is there and at least able to watch this thing. But you would hate for the season to really be impacted like that and in a negative way for a team that's just been through all that it's been through.
Right. And this is a conversation that we have as our understanding is that Damar Hamlin's vital signs are stabilized as of last night. Buffalo Bills and medical professionals in Cincinnati both having made statements to that effect. So again, we're in real time. We're looking at the situation as it presents itself right now. And we're understanding writ small compared to the NFL writ large that it's a minefield. The NFL can only do damage in this instance by being overly concerned with its bottom line. If I anticipate anything from the NFL, it'll be an overcorrection in the direction of being careful and appearing to be as sensitive as possible, which may then, because these players understand what they signed up for, quote unquote, get pushed back on home. I'm sure that you have 3,500 players in the league. If you tell them, yeah, we're going to call that game a tie, and as a result, this happens to you and that happens to you, and hey, I just trained for 6 months and now I'm out of the playoffs or in the playoffs, or my team doesn't get this because of that. Aren't we supposed to play? It's going to be interesting to watch because the reactions in any mass of people are going to be varied. Phil, we don't have a lot to add. We will have more to add in the next Pats podcast and on Thursday in Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. So for now, obviously, not just best wishes to Damar Hamlin and his family, but to all his Buffalo Bills teammates and the fellowship of players in the NFL we're lucky enough to cover.